Matters, which the Raza Foundation organizes in collaboration with the India International Center. We have been at it for almost 12 years now. This series has turned out to be one of the better attended series in the India International Center. And we are very grateful to all of you who make it to these sessions and also to our speakers. Some of you would recall that last time we had a panel of people driven and taken from theatre, etc., music, to talk about collapse of culture. I think collapse of culture is a recurring phenomenon. One can almost say that culture seems to be collapsing on a daily basis. Something or the other happens which make you suddenly realize that another something has collapsed which related to culture. There are cracks, for instance, which can result in a collapse of a certain culture of living and ecology and such like. So last time when Sadanand Menon was here, Sadanand Menon's presence here has become rather rare. He doesn't move out very much, for whatever reasons. So I asked him to come and give a talk. The collapse is so widespread that in fact some of the cultural figures also have become part of the bulldozers, drive the bulldozing gang in a certain sense. So this is alarming that there is a complicity of a section of creative community in orchestrating this collapse. We hope to continue this series beyond this as well. Now, Sadanand Menon is a well-known culture critic. He has had interaction with some of the best creative minds of India in the last 50 years. He has been known for his critical boldness, also well known for connecting culture to politics and economics. He's also been very imaginative in discovering certain aspects of specific works or trends which would otherwise might have gone unnoticed. So we have a very interesting speaker today, Sadanand Menon. And Mr. Menon, now you take over and make me shut.
And the trustees and office bearers of the Raza Foundation, whom I've known for many years now, and all the people who do the legwork in this organization. But let me clarify that in the invitation that was sent out, in the poster that was printed, etc., the subject assigned to me was collapse of culture, which is not my subject. It's a subculture within the, a sub-theme within the larger rubric of art matters that, as Ashok said, has been happening for 12 years and rather successfully, with some wonderful speakers and some wonderful contributions. My own title for today evening, it's a bit of a complicated title, is something like the politics of negating the possibility of subversion in culture. And to me, that's what's cumulatively happening today. The fact that the idea of culture also carries within it a certain notion of subversion, and an entire politics that is happening around us today, which very deliberately, I would say, attempts to negate that possibility. I'll come to that slowly. It often happens that when one begins thinking around a proposition, there is some kind of conceptual confusion and an inability to find the right image to adequately address the problematic on hand. When you are close to a subject, vision is sometimes fuzzy. I remember my good friend Chandralekha, while working on her magnificent production on time, Mahakal, agonizing for weeks on end because she said, I'm not getting a visual for time. The rehearsals were on and sequences were being composed, but she was visibly in turmoil. Then one day, as she was standing outside the gate, Pattamma from the neighboring fishing village walked by, and Chandra asked her, how are things with you, Pattamma? She asked in Tamil, and Pattamma replied, what can one say, Amma? It is all Kala Sarpa. Chandra came running back to the rehearsal, beaming away. I've got it, she announced. Kala Sarpa, the serpent of time. The serpent is the shape of time. From there on, her full production was just a slither away. I too was muddling along until just 2 days ago, we had the Tamil festival of Kanum Pongal. It's a very big festival in Tamil Nadu and often lasts for 4 days. On the last day, it's called Kanum Pongal. That's a day when people visit each other or go out of their houses. When hundreds and thousands of people throng the beaches and parks and zoos and such public areas. I live right at the beginning of a popular beach in Chennai, which attracts thousands on this auspicious day. This year, very thoughtfully, the Chennai police had set up a tall panoptic watchtower right in the middle of the beach with a radial assembly of loudspeakers booming away at very high decibels. By 3 p.m. in the afternoon, the crowds had swelled, and a lady officer, presumably with a dulcet voice, was in stern flow. It is wonderful to see so many families on the beach, she announced. It is wonderful to see so many families on the beach with children. But remember, children are slippery. Please hold on to them tightly so as not to lose them. All this is happening in Tamil. The waters on the shore are very inviting, but please don't step into it because it's very deep and dangerous. All you ladies out here are wearing nice and expensive jewelry, but please cover it up with your pallus and dupattas lest it attract attention. Please do not let your phones, watches, purses out of sight. Also, and this is the clincher, also, if you spot any suspicious looking person, please report to us instantly. This set of oxymorons was exactly what I needed. The policewoman made me clearly see culture now as a bundle of conjoined opposites swirling around us. Children, ornaments, purses are good as long as they are attached to the personal pronoun. In someone else's hand, they constitute a cultural collapse. The person next to you in the festival crowd is good, as long as he is not suspicious looking, whatever that might mean. But a different color, language, religion, dress turns him instantly dangerous and worth peaching on. And this is precisely where the law can turn illegal. At the heart of the cultural conundrum, always there is law with all its ambiguity. Remember, all our present cultural predicaments have a legal peg. Shah Banu, Babri Masjid, Ram Mandir, M.F. Hussain, citizenship, conversions. Why, even the latest to-do about the singing of Allama Iqbal's 1902 prayer Bachche Ki Dua in a school in Bareilly. In most cases, the trope is similar and predictable. An FIR is filed claiming hurt sentiments or claims of being offended on religious or cultural grounds. A case is registered, a so-called inquiry is initiated, arrests are mandated, and an obliging and over-enthusiastic lower judiciary is readily available to put the seal of legality over all this. Yet we all know the legal framework evoked is both tenuous as well as spurious. The legal invocations can often be absolutely atrocious. Let me illustrate with an example. When the Indian Criminal Procedure Code of 1898 was revised in 1972 and enacted in 1973, the task of publishing the text came to Orient Longman. Just out of college then, I was given a retainer to copy edit the revised manuscript. It was a task that provided considerable amusement, even as it struck terror in one's heart. One of the articles of law deleted in the revised version is a law on a criminal type described as a scoundrel. Now, who is a scoundrel? This is the definition. A scoundrel is one who sleeps by day and wakes by night. One who rousts about. And no one knows from whence he came and whither he went. No wonder it was dropped in the revision, for this can apply easily to each one of us today. But don't be surprised if it makes its way back into our law books very soon. So apropos of all this, let me say up front that I have considerable problems with the proposition of cultural collapse. Theoretically, I am unable to regard culture as some sort. It's off. Yeah. Theoretically, I am unable to regard culture as some sort of a structural edifice amenable to collapse. It surely is not like the buildings in Joshimath experiencing a devastating crumble. Nor can culture be imagined as cracking up and being affected by the subsidence of loose soil at the base. One perhaps needs to understand culture like water or air, as a unified fabric that forms, molds, transforms, mutates, inverts, insinuates, immerses, even infuriates, and so on. But never collapses. Or as one of our most important thinkers of the 20th century, Antonio Gramsci said, as he proposed, culture is a continuous form of coercion and consent. That's the framework within which what we understand and enact as culture seems to play out. The well-known literary critic Terry Eagleton famously said, "From pig farming to Picasso, everything is culture." But if pig farms go bankrupt or Picasso's paintings are vandalized, culture doesn't collapse. Instead, it becomes a sign of the emergence of a new culture. One, of course, understands the spirit and anxiety in which such formulations happen. Like what Amartya Sen said in an interview with Karan Thapar on The Wire just a few days ago. He talked of a reduction of the idea of India, a distortion of India, of life here having become precarious and barbaric, with a horrendous potential for nastiness, of the abominable decline of India, of the denigration and demolition of its history as well as its present, and so on. He emphatically used the word terrified to describe how he felt about the present Indian situation. Exactly in the same vein, another important public intellectual, Ganesh Devi, too used the same T word, the terrified word, recently at a talk at Manthan in Hyderabad. A couple of days ago at the Kolkata Literary Festival, Mallika Sarabhai spoke of the complete destruction of the ideals of the country. On an earlier occasion, after a spate of lynchings, Mallika had said, "How shall I describe the depravity of spirit that leads us into becoming lynch mobs, condoned in indifference and silence by all of us? What culture are we harping on preserving? What Sanskriti? If this be our culture, may it perish at once. If this be our Sanskriti, may apocalypse come now." There are also delectable ironies, like the denial of permission to the Jananatya Manch to perform in Sardar Hashmi's memory just last week on January 12 at the Jamia Millia campus, in the very amphitheatre named after Sardar Hashmi. All this can cumulatively perhaps buttress the notion of cultural collapse. Similar ideas of cultural collapse have been explored earlier too in modern history, even if by using varying expressions. Many in this room will remember Wilhelm Reich's use of the term emotional canker in his celebrated work, The Mass Psychology of Fascism, as well as in his scathing pamphlet, Listen, Little Man, which were rants against the easy capitulation of citizens to the demeaning ideas of humanity within fascism and Nazism. Or Arthur Kiesler's influential Darkness at Noon, which along with the works of intellectuals like Ignazio Silone, George Orwell, Louis Fisher, and Stephen Spender, and in books like The God That Failed, became a dissection of the pathology of cultural collapse under Stalinism. One can get to the point quickly here. For the past 100 years at least, humankind has been living with a sinking feeling. Cultural catastrophes of one kind or the other in swift succession have been tearing asunder the veneer of our so-called civilizational achievements. There have been pandemics, wars, genocides. There have been colonial, imperial, and fascistic authoritarianisms. The destructive, exterminating potential of nuclear strike has been demonstrated. Droughts, famines, starvation have racked a majority of nations. The more scientific rationality thrusts forward, the more we seem to be beset with religious fundamentalisms and hostilities. Racism, casteism, capitalism, and patriarchy have become the exploitative cornerstones of our advanced culture. There is a daily quota of riots, violence, incarcerations, penitential torture, deprivation, aggrandizement, and institutionalized assaults on the human body. Closer home, in the past few years, we have seen the naked face of aggressive jingoism, toxic nationalism, virulent majoritarianism, demonstrative chauvinism, rampant sexism, and galloping obscurantism, accompanied by the quarreling of minority populations, lynchings, assaults on a way of life, food, dress, worship, love, relationships, and livelihood. Just 4 days ago, Oxfam put out this survey report which says a mere 1% of Indians own 40% of its wealth, while the bottom 50% of the population gets a mere 3% share of that wealth. The report, titled Survival of the Richest, further said that if India's current crop of 166 billionaires, up from 102 in 2021, if India's current crop of 166 billionaires are taxed once at 2% only on their entire wealth, it would support the requirement of 40,000 crores for the nutrition of malnourished in the country for the next 3 years. Obviously, not just economically, but even culturally, this disparity is unsustainable. On top of it, we have seen the systemic infiltration and capture of institutions like the parliament, the judiciary, the media, the universities, constitutional bodies like the Election Commission, the Enforcement Directorate, the CAG, and in fact the Constitution itself. Now each time we hear all this, we shake our head in lament and say, that's another wicket down for culture, another proof of our cultural collapse. However, I'd like to propose that the idea of cultural collapse is advanced mostly when a ruling elite is periodically beset by anxiety and finds some of its conceptual certitudes and way of life under challenge from quarters it hitherto despised. It is hardly a politically sharp position. A more astute position would be to understand the collapse in broader terms as an increasing inability to maintain a civil and functioning society. Even more politically radical would be the realization that every shining, tangible or intangible cultural trophy we value contains within it the trap of simultaneously pandering to humanity's shady side. Because the deft definition of the idea of cultural collapse in a modern democracy can indeed only be the end of citizenship. It is precisely the kind of oppressive imaginary society that the novelist, cartoonist O.V. Vijayan had proposed in his 1969 Malayalam novel, Kazakh in the Itihasam, The Legend of Kazakh. And it is not as if our society is in danger of slipping into that nebula where our cherished rights and freedoms and traditions and values evaporate, but that we have to wake up to the fact that we have always been living in that penumbra. It's like the conjoined nature of Krishna Paksha and Shukla Paksha of the moon. There are no compartments called good and bad culture. It is one and the same thing. And as Donna Haraway says, the world has always been in the middle of things in unruly and practical conversation. My favorite philosopher, Walter Benjamin, articulated this with remarkable clarity in his thesis on the philosophy of history. He said, there is no document of culture, let me repeat, there is no document of culture that is not at the same time a document of barbarism. I have been teaching for some years, and there's a games often I play in my classrooms. I ask, how many of you have been here today without brushing your teeth? Hardly a hand goes up, as it might turn out if I ask the question here. So I say, okay, all of you seem to be votaries of the universal cultural logic called oral hygiene. And even more crucially, the cultural idea of beauty vested with whiteness of teeth. So how many of you belong to the Colgate-Palmolive family? And how many to the Pepsodent Unilever family? Across classrooms in the country over the last roughly 10 years, I have found both these multinationals corner almost 40% each of the teeth whitening market. The remaining 20% are split between desi brands like Biko, Dabur, Neem, Meswak, Ayush, and so on, or medical prescriptions like Sensodyne, or more indigenous practices like the Neem stick, etc. Then I point out that both Colgate and Pepsodent are $50+ billion companies. It takes very little investment on their part to pack into a tube a compound of calcium carbonate blended with some hydrated silica and aromated or flavored cellulose, gum or paste. So performing a reverse audit, what happens to these enormous profits? One gets startled when one realizes that much of the easy profits of Colgate-Palmolive, Unilever or Procter & Gamble are reinvested into the global armaments industry. So a simple, innocent, healthy cultural practice like cleaning one's teeth, stealthily on the obverse side, sustains global wars and genocides. You can be forgiven for receiving a culture shock. Thank God, lions and other animals don't brush their teeth. So what is this romance we have with culture, with all its violence and injustice and inequality and savagery? And why do we lament at any sign of its so-called collapse? Why don't we realize that culture too is one of the repressive arms of the potentially absolutist state and can be invoked at will in a multinational, multi-ethnic society like ours as an instrument to keep people divided and distracted. The state does not hesitate to posture as if all positive cultural manifestations are a direct consequence of its own beneficence. But it has only managed to generate a spurious set of premises of bogus cultural nationalism, which are in reality manifestly anti-people and conspire to discredit healthy cultural diversity in favor of a uniform and homogenized mode of being. The older Indian elite still lives with the fantasy that we are a culturally versatile and healthy society. The army and paramilitary can convert teenagers in Kashmir into pin cushions with their pellet guns and blow out their eyes. There is no national uproar. Yet we are convinced we are cultured. In Bengavayal near Trichy in Tamil Nadu, human faces can be dumped into the overhead water tank supplying drinking water to the Dalit village. None of us lose our sleep over it. Yet we will hold our heads high and boast of our superior culture. These are as much acts against conscience as acts under the umbrella of state consent. These are acts that reduce the law into an ass. We need the wisdom to see that a state that has rapidly centralized and colonized all ideas and symbols and institutions of power cannot tolerate the notion of communities having the freedom to generate their own specific cultures. It is an area of autonomy that can prove a dangerous impediment to the design for total control, because obviously, besides everything else, culture is also a deep source for subversion and dissent. That explains the concerted attack on culture from the Indian state today. Till now, the attack was on people's livelihoods and on their fundamental rights. Now the attack is on their very dignity itself, their unique cultural identity. This ideological shift at the very heart of cultural production, from everyday life to its imbrication in power politics, is profoundly disturbing. It indicates the related shift in cultural concepts from the realm of integrative processes to the theater of the disjunctive, the divisive, the disruptive. All of a sudden, culture with a capital C gets instrumentalized and now stands opposed to people. Not a cultural collapse, but a cultural attack. There has also been a vigorous attempt in official parlance to separate culture from the totality of life and reduce it to an artifact. This is typical. From artifact to archetype is but a short step, and standardization is the magic formula of social harmony that the authoritarian state conceives. This conception also reduces culture to a commodity, a plaything of market forces and consumer caprice, delinked from life as experienced and organized in the multiplicity of social exchanges. It inevitably generates the syndrome of cultural warehousing, a stockpiling of cultural resources and products divorced from their processes on the shelves of privileged and exclusive godowns to be bought at leisure as from a department store by men of means. The attempt is on now on behalf of the elite to equate cultural monopoly with capital monopoly. Culture, which is essentially in a flux and always in the making, is being suddenly deep frozen and hoarded as avariciously as property. On the other hand, for the vast majority of the dispossessed victims of the era of neo-colonialism and economic liberalization, culture remains an additional front on which the battle has to be fought. For them, the evidence of any past existence of cultural riches only confirms the present oppression of the system. All the talk of past glory and cultural uniqueness of the majority of population is a new smokescreen for some robust minority bashing. Social theorists, primarily structural anthropologists, have talked about how every society evolves its own cultural vents in order to balance out the tension that builds up as an oppressed culture wriggles and writes and dissents and revolts within a dominant culture. Periodic festivals and carnivals help in foregrounding the cultural practices of the subaltern and enable them to let off steam. These are mostly tightly controlled but provide sufficient elbow room and ambience for amusement and entertainment. These help break the monotony of daily routine and create a counterpoint to a life of travail and drudge and subservience. Most importantly, they introduce into the given fixed world of conditioned normality the experience of negativity, otherness, abnormality. This negativity, as the philosopher Christopher Lasch uses the term, is a powerful social mechanism as it helps to pose before society positively the image of its own underside and its creative potential. These periodic mass festivals, endemic to all tribal, peasant, and religious communities, integrate into them the entire residual flakes of that culture, which would normally not fit in anywhere else. Being people's celebrations, they constitute the meeting place of types not easily socialized, like mendicants and quacks, soothsayers and conmen, acrobats and wrestlers, snake charmers and dealers in aphrodisiacs, prostitutes and pickpockets, the drunk and the demented, transgenders and performers, craftsmen and balladeers, a talented, floating, quasi-criminal, marginalized population on the social fringes, even the acceptance of whose existence is embarrassing for the elite. Among these, the term culture merely means survival and a momentary chance at social acceptance. Conversely, for those not shackled by middle-class morality, these are occasions for the suspension of ordinary rules of behavior and entry into the realm of the sexual and the irrational. Our melas, utsavs, purams, perunals, urs, leelas, and so on denote the repressed side of society's consciousness, a side which returns with fixed regularity to haunt established culture with all it does not want to acknowledge about itself. But the peculiar phenomenon we are experiencing now is unfiltered expression of hatred and violence in the exhortations of leaders of the majority community and their vocalization of all that hitherto remained deeply buried in the social psyche. It is a sort of mimicking of the unfiltered regurgitation of the vilest of one's thoughts, which would normally take the patient skills of a psychiatrist to pull out from the labyrinths of one's own head, brought out with unapologetic ease onto the social media platforms. It is the emergence of a community of saffron-clad, self-proclaimed dharma gurus and sannyasis who are supposed to have renounced the world for higher and more humane pursuits, suddenly displaying uncontrolled bile and bloodlust while seeking physical annihilation and genocide of minority communities. Annihilation of class enemies was a tenet of a few Maoist factions in the Indian political left, which made them both radical on the one hand as well as targets of the state's policy of annihilation of anyone who professes violence. But today, most Maoist Naxalite groups have retreated from this strategy and yet continue to be hounded by the state for imaginary political excesses. But when bloodthirsty religious figures in saffron attire give out such calls, they walk away with instant bail, heroes welcome, and public adulation. When someone who calls herself Sadhavi exhorts those in the majority community to sharpen their knives and unhesitatingly use it against minorities, she gets elected and buys herself immunity from prosecution. It is this egregious desire and ability to willfully transgress whatever we know as law, culminating in morphological irregularity by sections of people who till recently were described as non-violent, peace-loving, tolerant, and accommodating, that has become the hallmark of the present times. They have now developed the cunning capacity to call the law into question and to disable it. They are also going further to ridicule and devalue the very idea of the basic structure of the Constitution. Of course, you are aware that such tendencies have emerged in the USA and in Brazil too. With technology today, one can alter an image or photograph in the Photoshop. One can alter one's look through reconstructive surgery. But can one alter one's nature? Religion, spirituality, meditation was supposed to be a restitutive route towards this. But when these very same instruments turn rogue and urge you to practice hatred and intolerance, they presage an altered humanity. Any change in culture is in fact a sign of a change in the human condition. One needs to find ways to develop and articulate a theory for the self-liberating logic of historic revenge in a dangerously large number of our fellow citizens who also have the tacit backing of the highest powers in the land. Of course, this is not new. For at least over 2 millennia, the mainstream religious practices here have constructed a fearsome other and given it names like Danav, Asur, Daitya, Rakshasa, Paishacha, and so on. This is an integral part of 2000 years of our cultural baggage. The terminological and therefore social ostracization of forest dwellers, Adivasis, dependent slaves, Atishudras, Adi-Dravidas, and so on. The Varnashrama helped in making watertight compartments of privileges, rights, duties, and submissions. Inclusion-exclusion was the very rationale of what Louis Dumont characterized as Homo hierarchicus. This caricaturing increased when migrant communities began entering the subcontinent in larger numbers, some of whom stayed on to become rulers and power brokers in dispersed regions. But at the height of the British colonial rule in the late 19th century, as they began perceiving growing resistance to their hegemony, it was also seen to be profitable to divide the communities. One of the emblems of this heightening Hindu-Muslim tension was the printing in 1897 of the inflammatory poster Chaurasi Devtaon Wali Gai. I have an image of that here, so one can show it. Originally printed in the Ravi Verma press, The poster depicts a cow with 84 divinities lodged in different parts of its body, from horn to hoof, and a porcine-looking asur advancing towards it with a chopper. In this image, it's a sword, but there are other images in books by Christopher Penny and Jyotindra Jain, etc., where it's actually a butcher's chopper. It was a clear dog whistle pointing to Muslims as butchers and cow eaters. There was vigorous protest from the Muslim community, and the matter went to court. When the court suggested that the poster be withdrawn, it was the turn of the Hindu plaintiffs to protest vehemently. As the case drew on and seemed to be heading towards generating possible street violence and bloodshed, the entire case was transferred to London for judicial intervention. It was here that the media headlines greeted it as the holy cow case. The court there figured out a via media. It ruled that the poster could be printed without the image of the asur. Subsequent print runs did remove the figure, but already the idea of Muslims as monsters had begun to take root in many aggressive Hindu articulations. It was merely awaiting the arrival of a Hindutva ideologue to bloom into an entire trope. So this is how it looked like when it was reprinted. But the damage had been done, and from 1897, 1896 onwards, it just took something like 12 years for this to become like a established and respected, socially accepted manner of addressing the other in Indian society. Recent academic debates have explored how social and cultural threats have come to be embodied in the figure of the monster, and how their actual or imaginary actions valorize our deepest fears. You'll have to mention Michel Foucault, for example, in his work Abnormal, which were essays compiled in the year 2007, how Foucault has elaborated the idea of the monster and how it operates as a master category for understanding contemporary forms of exclusion, erasure, surveillance, and control. It is a category that is comprehensible only within the terms of the transgression of law, and how it leads to the emergence of the power of normalization of such renegade law. Such monster formations in everyday culture force us to take a look at ourselves. Ideas of progress have always been twinned with fear of progress and of science and technology. Within the era of postmodernity, the all-enveloping claim on the so-called human essence of our identity appears to be under threat. For the average citizen, the question is terrifying. Should one embrace change or reject it? Foucault also warns against the ubiquity of power and how it possesses a dark and insidious dimension. It is relentless and remorseless. Its accumulation and use becomes its sole justification. The fear of having to relinquish power drives its engines as it grows in monstrous proportions. This construct might seem hyper-paranoid, but Foucault arrives at the formula that power equals knowledge, emphasizing that each item is reduced to the other. Power is gained through knowledge, while what is held up as knowledge is determined by power. This equation is the oxygen for the contemporary pestilence of the cancel culture, which, with its petulant rejection of reasoned debate and its ferocious joy of tossing out people from inside a discourse without feeling any need for listening to them. The point should be clear by now. Subversion was integral to the idea of culture and its consolidation. The nemesis of bourgeois culture was always lurking behind its image in the mirror. The present appropriation of culture, of cultural disruption, by a regime that openly mocks the constructive power of culture, in fact performs a major task of unsettling the idea of subversion. It has almost ended up taming and negating the act of subversion. That is the crisis of culture today. And it should provoke us to seek counters and rejoinders from within culture itself. Somewhat in the manner of Pierre Bourdieu's idea of deculturation, Pierre Bourdieu's idea of a new man produced through the process of deculturation and reculturation. Yet, something happened just a few weeks ago, and I'll conclude with this, which for me encapsulates this entire problematic. A young Brahmin corporate honcho of a multinational corporation, traveling business class on an international flight, got up midway and pissed on another passenger across the aisle. Today, this young multimillionaire's father is defending him, saying he has been brought up with good Brahmin samskara. He will never do anything like that. For those who collect such precious comments, this should be a familiar line. For hardly a few months ago, exactly the same was said of a bunch of convicted rapists and murderers who were prematurely released by the Gujarat High Court. We were assured that a highly cultured Brahmin would never do anything of this sort. Note that all of them are being certified as having been brought up as good Brahmins, not as good citizens. Compared to all the other listings I made earlier in my talk, for me, it is this incident that becomes the totem of our times. We are very happy to having become a culture that derives pleasure in pissing on people. But you will ask, doesn't this mean collapse of culture? I beg to differ. For me, this is culture. Thank you. Small clip from the last portion of this wonderful Charlie Chaplin film called The Great Dictator. And I think we need to re-see it for a particular... Where is it gone? Ah, here it is. Sorry?
His Excellency, Herr Garvin, Secretary of the Interior, Minister of Propaganda.
Please listen to what he's saying.
Corona veni accidentes. Victory shall come to the world. Today, democracy, liberty, and equality are words to fool the people. No nation can progress with such ideas. They stand in the way of action. Therefore, we frankly abolish them.
You heard this recently.
In the future, each man will serve the interest of the state with absolute obedience. Let him who refuses beware. The rights of citizenship will be taken away from all Jews and other non-Aryans. They are inferior, and therefore enemies of the state. It is the duty of all true Aryans to hate and despise them. Henceforth, this nation is annexed to the Tomanian Empire, and the people of this nation will obey the laws bestowed upon us by our great leader, the dictator of Tomania, the conqueror of Austerlitz, the future emperor of the world.
So, little bit of the romance of the 1940s, but very applicable to today. Thank you.
Well, friends, after this very brilliant and disturbing talk by Sadanand Menon, surely there will be some questions. Please only ask questions. Don't give your opinion. One. Two, let them be brief and pointed. So let's, the first person raise the hand and the mic will come to you. Is there such a person in this audience who will raise the hand first? Do not be afraid. Rise to the occasion. Well, yes, okay. Please also give your name. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Johnny Emil. I'm a writer. Sadanand Menon finished the talk by saying that, or recounting the incident that happened recently in the flight. So his father, that boy's father, said that he was brought up in a Brahminical way. And we all accuse that the right-wing forces or the Brahminical forces that is ruling the country, the forces are responsible for such kind of a scenario or such kind of a narrative. But recently, we all know that in Kerala, K.R. Narayanan Film Institute, where Adur Gopalakrishnan, the much revered film personality in India, he said the sanitization workers there are dressing up to become stars and get the limelight, get into the limelight, only because these women raised the issue that they were forced to work and they were asked to clean the toilets with their own hands by the director and the director's wife, who is Shankar Mohan. And when this issue came up, and the students have been actually on strike for the last 38 days or 40 days, and when this issue came up, Adur Gopalakrishnan said, he's the chairman of the institution, he said that Shankar Mohan is brought up in such a Kulina family. You know that, a Kulina family means like you can roughly translate it as a kind of well-to-do and cultured, quote-unquote, cultured family. So he will never use this kind of casteism in that institution. And the Dalit and the SC/ST students have been the victims of this particular thing. And till now, Adur Gopalakrishnan has been supporting, and even he came to support one actor called Dilip, who actually assaulted, literally asked someone, paid someone to rape one actress. The latest thing, I'm coming to the point, the latest thing is Kerala Chief Minister. Kerala, everyone knows that it's ruled by CPM, the left party, which is supposedly opposing the right-wing forces in India. The Kerala Chief Minister yesterday said that Adur Gopalakrishnan is the pride of Kerala and he is well known and he is the cultural ambassador. So where exactly you locate this Brahminical thing of the right wing and the leftists who are supposed to be leading forces against the right wing forces?
Yeah, well, it's not really a question, it's an observation, and there's nothing much to say about this because he's not talking only of a notional right wing or a notional left wing when we talk of a larger cultural construct. But nevertheless, it's a trap into which every segment of society falls in, every political party falls into, and so on. And it will keep happening and keep repeating unless more strong and more concerned debates and discussions happen on this. What exactly all this represents. So, like I gave some examples in Stalinist Russia. Enough such distortions of culture happened. We even had a cultural commissar called Sadanand, Stalin's son-in-law, who dictated what artists should do, what poets should write, etc. etc. So, and here the complexity is even more. The caste complexity creates, I think, a huge new level and a huge new complexity, which I don't think this society has still been able to grapple with. There have been attempts, the voices are coming up now, and there are counters, certainly, but not strong enough. And yeah, so someone like you, Johnny, should be writing more about it. That's all one can say.
Yes? Please wait for the mic.
Sadanand,
Your name, please.
sorry, I'm Ritika Kochar. We've met. When have we actually had this idealized culture which is now collapsing?
Sorry, say that again?
When was this idealized culture which is now collapsing?
No, at no moment, but there is no such one thing as culture. Like I was trying to explain, there is an elite construct that becomes the construct for everybody. As the famous, what do you call it, the theorization of ideology that Marx created in his book called German Ideology, the ideas of the ruling classes somehow become the ideas of society. So even though there is a different culture, there is a counter culture, there is even a contesting culture down below, it's what is the dominant construct which begins to become what is called common sense. And that's the most difficult part, when it becomes common sense. So, like what Johnny said, if there is a drain to be cleaned, then only a certain kind of people go in to clean that drain. It's common sense. Why should I go? I have that person who will do it for me. So this common sense is what needs to be, I think, unpacked and in fact exposed as the very sense that exploits a large number of people. So it's very clear that there is no one culture which collapses, because then we'll not be sitting here. And like I was trying to say, in a democracy, the idea of loss of culture is actually the idea of loss of citizenship. And we need to be very, very aware of this. I mean, there are many people who, for example, equate culture with language and speech. And if you don't have the freedom to work with language and speech, and it's controlled, and you have to look over your shoulder, and you have to get somebody's permission, or the moment you say something, you are beaten up or arrested, or as the stand-up comedian, even before you say something, you are arrested, because you may be thinking like that, then we are in trouble. So basically that's the way one has to understand a larger perspective.
Mr. Menon, this is Dr. Sarji Dudeja. We will be talking of this culture. I think it's going on for last 5,000 years, and it may continue another 5,000 years. So, what's something special which is happening recently?
5,000 years is compressed into 5 years now, with more intensity.
Hi, this is Parsa here. Now, if we were to fight the dominant culture, do you need counter values and counter ideas to whether to bring it down or to contest it as such? Do we need ideas in defining culture, practicing culture, and when you are challenging another culture and its ideas, do you need counter ideas?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And the point is, I think you don't have to search too much afar. Those counter ideas exist amidst us. They've been suppressed, they've been silenced, They have been pushed down in the shelf space. So one is that, one is the research and the need to bring that material up. The other is what I said at the end, what Pierre Bourdieu's construct of creating a new human being through a process of deculturation and then reculturation. Now, how that is to be done is a very tough proposition. I mean, one can think about it. It's a fantasy. It's a beautiful fantasy. It's a bit like, I'm reminded once again, Michel Foucault, when he talks of ideology. He has said, very interestingly, that by the time a person is 5 years old, that person is fully ideological. You don't have to wait till you're 21 and 51 and 61 and all that. At 5 years old, the boy knows that being a boy is advantageous to him as compared to the sister. There is already a gender thing that is built up in this boy's head because there's certain privileges that come to him, certain advantages that come to him. So the boy knows that that person who is my driver, who drops me to school, is a person I can talk roughly to or sharply to. I can't do that to my father or mother or elder brother, etc. So Foucault's proposition was that ideology comes to us in a capillary way. Through the pores of our skin, we absorb it. And by the time you're 5 years old, you are completely ideologized. Then it takes some time, by the time you're in school, college, a different kind of acculturation comes, a different kind of exposure comes, a different reading comes, different life experiences come, and something happens to change that or transform it, or at least make you question yourself. So Foucault says and this is again the wonderful fantasy part of it, that the only way to deal with this is when you wake up every day, sit on your bed for 5 minutes and think seriously about what oppression, what tyranny, what infamy am I going to support today? And then work the whole day against it. Go against the grain of that. Which means work against yourself. That's a challenge. And I seriously believe that can be one of the routes to like getting to understand the complexity of this whole thing, this intangible thing and tangible thing that we call culture.
Raghav Chandra, I'm looking at a converse side. From the governmental point of view, when government promotes culture, can you give me some examples of a social system which has benefited through better governance or a better rule of law by government's investment in tangible and intangible forms of promotion of culture?
Yeah, it's a contradiction in terms. I'd like to point to a particular seminar that happened in Delhi in the year 1953, when the academies were to be set up. Sangeet Natak Academy, the Lalit Kala Academy, the Sahitya Academy. There was a proposal that the government do something for culture. And the whole 3-day or 4-day discussion has been now brought out as a 3-volume edition by the Sangeet Natak Academy. You can read all the proceedings that happened, what various people said, V. Raghavan and Rajavan Nar, and so on. Kamladevi Chattopadhyaya, after whom this building is named, her first exclamation was, "A ministry of culture, God forbid." That's what she said. But can you let the government escape? No, you cannot. Because in our constitution, it is mandated that just like people's economic and social and political welfare has to be undertaken by the state, so too its cultural well-being. It's a nebulous term, cultural well-being. What does it mean? They don't know. There is no footnote explaining what it means, but at least it's been thought about. So we, the people who give ourselves this constitution, say that we must also be given cultural goods. Now, how that works is what we've been grappling with for 75 years. Ashok has been at the helm of many cultural academies, and one knows the sheer difficulty and the sheer almost street fighting nature of these academies and how power is worked on. So ultimately, whatever government agency deals with these things boils down to power. Who holds power, who disperses power, and who receives it. But there are examples, interesting examples of some states in the world, some governments in the world who have managed to not fully solve it, but at least there have been some tendencies towards it. In Germany, for example, post-World War II Germany has been a great supporter of cultural work, including dissenting cultural work. Not just that which sing praises of the government, but also those which are doing completely edge of the seat, cutting edge kind of new work, many of it very provocative and sometimes unacceptable by audiences and so on. But there is a whole, let's say, universe out there that's trying to solve this problem. But in the Indian context, I seriously believe, even though I have seen again and again government initiatives on culture being terribly instrumental and terribly ineffective because of lack of experience or lack of information or lack of skill, lack of training, things just collapse. Culture doesn't collapse, but the National Museum can collapse. The Sangeet Natak Academy can collapse. That's been happening. But we cannot at any moment sit back and say, oh, okay, the government cannot do it, let's go to the private sector. I think that's a very big foolhardiness if the people of this country begin thinking like that. That the private sector has money, they have expertise, they're willing to give you time, and they're looking for some kind of profit, and there is competition. So the life of the artist is better under corporate governance. I think that's a fallacy. I think you need a dispassionate umpire which looks at everything with a level. That's what's not happened here. The level playing field has not happened. But we need to work towards getting it happen. I mean, we have artists like Inder Salim and all sitting here, Shiba Chachi, who have been doing that work. But there will be a time when the government will see this as a oppositional work, which is the unfortunate part. Whenever this is construed as oppositional, then it becomes confrontational, and obviously all solutions get lost. I think Meera Kaushik can give some examples from her work in UK, where the way the arts institutions work there through a kind of a public-private sort of understanding.
Hello sir, my name is Unnati Sharma, I'm a journalist. So what are your thoughts on the exoticization of certain cultural elements, especially from the non-dominant or marginalized sections? Like for example, the tribal museum in Bhopal. When I visited there, I felt conflicted because there's no denying that there is some educational value, but at the same time, it doesn't feel right that there is sort of like a jhanki of, the cultural elements of the tribals. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're right, Unnati. I mean, again, there are no short answers to this, and all of us can feel equally anguished with that kind of situation. But right from day one, from the time the idea of the Republic Day was construed, marginalized cultures, what you call exotic, have always been considered as being showpieces to reflect what our unwritten cultural policy is, unity in diversity. Which you will see few days down the line in Delhi, if you live in Delhi, when the Republic Day parade goes past, you will see all these tribes and Bastar tribes and this tribe and that tribe and all. who until for the rest of the 364 days of the year, they are invisible. You don't know where they are. But suddenly on that day, they appear on the streets of Delhi, and they are supposed to be markers of our great diversity and accommodativeness. We are accommodating them. There's the latest issue of a magazine which comes out from Chennai called Frontline, which has a cover story on what's happening to the Great Nicobar Island, which is the lowest island in the Andaman Nicobar chain of islands. But it's a big landmass, comparatively big to many other smaller islands there. And a great government plan, central government plan, to convert that into a trading hub, harbour jetty for ships that will pass in that South China Sea and that region. To construct tourist spots, to construct an airstrip, to construct resorts and casinos, if you please. And what happens to the Shompen and the Nicobarese tribes living there? Oh, there are only 604 people. There are only 3,012 people. We will shift them. We will take them somewhere else. But you might bring them to the Republic Day parade and show them off. We have a Shompen. No. So only 64 people remain. See how we... So this exoticization is in fact another term for exploitation. Now my question is, the government is doing this and it will do it, and it's its rationale to do it. What do we people do? And I'm including all of us. What does the media do? How much spotlight does the media put on, okay, Nicobar too far away, only Pankaj Seksaria goes there and, spends months on end and spends his own money and brings out some material. Only Ajay Sahai goes there and, does some research once in a year. Difficult terrain. But what about right here, 100 kilometers away from Delhi, 50 kilometers away from Delhi, where these kind of things are happening? So, and this is the point I've been trying to make. The idea of culture is also the idea of turning a blind eye to it. I'm a culture person, I turn a blind eye to many things that are happening around me. In the back of my head, I may have some information, but the cultural action I take is to shut my eye. Kashmir is not far away from any one of us here sitting in Delhi. The kind of things that are happening there, how many people in Delhi have actually said something about it? How much? I mean, the media is the worst culprit in this whole story, of course. So, that's why I said there's no easy answer, there's no small answer. It's a whole tapestry of things that happen around. And for some reason, make us keep silent. That's also a culture. Culture of silence is also a very deep culture. And what will make us speak out? Faiz says, "Bol kilab azad hai tere." Kahan azad hai? किसी ने तो बंद तो नहीं किया, किसी ने सीखे तो नहीं रखा है, लेकिन जब तो खुलते ही नहीं, क्या करोगे?
Hi, my name is Hilal. So, my question is just, I'm pertaining to national consciousness and cultural consciousness. If this is the construction of India, and we have a construction of South Asia or subcontinent India. Describing or including this culture, culture is very much dealing with diplomacy. Diplomacy dealing with international organizations or something like that. So, in critiquing this 70 years of construction of India, we are describing the culture in that way. Then these 5 years or these 8 years, that kind of a culture, that kind of a construction of culture has been de-established in that way. But in kind of this South Asian or sub-Indian we have an already problem with these issues in that. So my question here is, dealing with this culture as an international way. They are dealing with this because without this culture, there is no diplomacy. So in that perspective, like you mentioned, multinational companies, even after they are getting this profit, they are spending in the culture. They are giving this, if they are in an artist groups or something like that, cultural groups. Now my question is also this, that means like we have a hybridity, like location of culture. Like he is dealing with, as you say, like it's in a broader term of the culture when we are defining. But this continental perspective, so we have a different, this collapse of culture. So like how we can include this when this settler is, as in a culture, he is investing here. So from the 70 years, there is lots of things like we have a Ford Foundation who is spending too much on the local cultures they are giving. That's kind of research which is establishing. That's one perspective of this culture is defining. So what we are dealing with here? It's
what is the question?
Question is like the culture of some Indian. How we can define that? How we can deal with that?
Yeah, I won't even try to define that. Obviously it's clear that there is no one culture. It's ridiculous to talk about one culture, but I'm going to pick on something that, one phrase that you used, where you connected culture and diplomacy. So if you want to understand the culture of or the idea of culture of the Indian state, then that is what it is. Culture as an arm of diplomacy and politics. And it was pretty fuzzy for about the first 20 years of post-Indian independence. But it was very clearly articulated in 1982 by none less than a wonderful cultural figure in Delhi called Upul Jaikar, who was like a policy maker and who was behind all these festivals of India and various things that happened. Big exhibitions like Aditi and Vishwakarma and so on. 1982, she made this proposition that culture now needs to be an arm of diplomacy and politics. So that fixes it in a particular slot because it's been given ambassadorial status. If it's going to be in diplomacy, then it's an ambassador. So out of, let's say, 50 artists sent abroad by India in 1 year, you will find that most of them are what the Indian state wants to show itself as. So in art, it will want to show itself as someone that promotes and propagates modern Indian art. So you might find artists from various art schools or well-known senior artists living in the metropolitan cities, etc., being sent abroad. When it comes to performing arts, suddenly the picture changes and becomes tradition. So no contemporary performer, etc. It will be some Bharatanatyam, some Odissi, some Kathak, etc. That's the image that the government wants to show. So it's a game that it plays. And this is a game that has been going on for, like I said, from the 1980s. It was there earlier too, but from the 1980s, very specifically, for the last 40 years, it's constructed itself in a particular way. And there has been no protest against it, there has been no challenge to it, there has been nobody who's coming up with a counter proposal. So it will go on like that. But the notion of one culture, no, I don't think that thing exists. But someone like you, Hilal, who is an artist, who is a research scholar, and who comes from a region in India which is going through turmoil, you will have to propose your own idea of
No, I'm looking like South Asia, the construction of South
I think that's a futile exercise. There's such fantastic hybridity. It's like Salman Rushdie said, we are all mongrels. Culturally, we are all mongrels. Every one of us have one of us has been inflected by somebody else's culture, we absorb it. There is no such thing as pure, no, 100% khora, that thing doesn't exist.
Now, at that level, we are dealing with post-colonialism. So, post-colonialism, who is our opponent?
Yeah, it's a long debate.
Well, friends, with that, we come to the end of the evening. Thank you very much, Sadanand, Menon, and I'm sure each one of you will go back with several questions in one's mind, which Sadanand Menon has so forcefully articulated for us. Thank you very much for being here. I don't know next Art Matters when to be organized it, because in February we'll be busy in another show in Centre de Pompidou in Paris. So after that we'll come back. Thank you very much. Now you can go wherever you want to.